Checkpoints is presented by pharmaceutical company GM Pharma.
Mr. Taniguchi, thank you for being with us and taking our questions. ADB released its economic growth outlook for the region, including Georgia. So how is Georgia doing compared to its peers in the region?
Thank you. Thank you for inviting this interview, and I'm very happy to come to this place. So today, ADB released Asian Development Outlook, and then we cover economic outlook of the developing Asia and also Georgia. And then Georgia is actually, economically speaking, doing well, and then better than the average of developing Asia. And then, just for example, 2023, the average Asia's growth rate is 5.0%, but then the Georgia, we expect GDP growth is 7.0%. So Georgia's economic growth is faster than the rest of Asia. And then one of the reasons why the Asian growth is a little bit slower than we expect is because of China. And then the Chinese growth is decelerating, partly because this real estate, the market turbulence, and then that affects the economy. And then for Georgian economy, 2022 was a special year because it was windfall gains for the Russian invasion of the Ukraine, and then there's financial and also the human capital inflows. And then in last few years, this the positive impact is subsiding. So the used to have much more capital, and then also the human capital from Russia, but then they start to go back to Russia. So we expect this trend will continue. So in that sense, Georgian economy will be moderating to the next 2 years. And then we are expecting the 2024 growth is 5.0%, still resilient, and then but then not as high as the historic high of 2022. But the replacing the Russian the remittances and also the human capital inflow by the tourists or the remittances from other than Russia. So still the Georgian economy exhibit the resilience against this the environment.
Would you say that ADB is more conservative in Georgia's economic growth outlook compared with, for example, World Bank or EBRD or other development partners of Georgia? And what is the reason for that? I'm not aware of the other institutions' the forecast, and then we make an honest the assessment based on the exogenous shocks and also the economic fundamentals we believe the Georgia has. But this is a time there's like a replacement. So used to be last 2 years the Russian positive impact is subsiding, and then it is replaced by the pre-pandemic, pre-invasion factors. And then how much positive and negative is replaced maybe affect our institutions' the forecast. Mm-hmm. So what would you say is like the spillover effects for Georgia's economic growth, both positive and negative from the region and beyond?
I think if you compare with, say, Armenian economy, Armenians, the tie with the Russian economy is much higher if you compare the export, the destinations. Georgia is much more diversified. Georgia is more connected with Europe and the China and then Asia. So if, for example, Russian economy comes down, and then the higher the inflations or the lower GDP growth, that will affect the Armenia much more than the Georgia. And then in that sense, we believe Georgian economy is much more resilient.
Mm-hmm. Looking at Russia-Ukraine war effect so far, how would you compare Georgia with other countries, like comparable countries?
If you look at Caucasus and the Central Asian countries, there are countries initially affected much more positively than the other countries, which are Armenia and Georgia. And then the initial impact in 2022, the positive impact is much larger compared to other countries in this region. However, if 2022 positive impact is larger, then the moderating effect is also faster. So we see the Armenia and Georgia, the subsiding positive effect is much quicker, say, compared to Uzbekistan. For example, Uzbekistan is also positively impacted, but the magnitude of impact is much less or much more nuanced compared to Georgia or Armenia. It is because in the case of Uzbekistan, there's a more human capital came rather than the financial remittances. And then those human capital is businesses. And then there's a lot of technology and then the knowledge transfer happened in Uzbekistan. And then the Russian entrepreneurs start the IT businesses in Uzbekistan. If this is the case, it is more resilient. And then the positive effect is not as large, but long lasting. So this is some differences in some different regions.
Mm-hmm. Do you think Georgia still has room to maintain its high economic growth momentum? Because what the Russian-Ukraine war did to Georgia's economy at the initial stage when it worked as a kind of like as a booster was two-digit economic growth. Of course, it is hard to maintain two-digit economic growth, but do you see the room for maintaining more or less high economic growth momentum?
In this question, I think the Georgia has two important shifts to make, which ADB considers it is important. One is the private sector development, another is the green transformation. So the private sector is the key for the economic growth. And then the Georgia still has a lot of room to improve the private sector activities. And then this is the small open economy, and then the private sector should be connected in the global supply chain. And then still the Georgian private sector is limited, or there's a room for improvement for the better connection. So I think one way to thrive Georgian economy is private sector development, and then more investment, more FDI, the foreign direct investment should come to this country. Another point is the green transformation, and then there's lots of climate change, the financing, the opportunities, and then this country has a lot of, for example, renewable opportunities, and then these are still untapped the investment opportunities, and then there's a more, it is necessary to promote investment in the climate change areas. And also the Georgia is risky for the disaster, the prone country. So the disaster risk management is also the key areas to protect the economic growth.
By the way, when we ask this question, we get like two main answers, more sector, I don't know how to call it, but more specifically, like we get the one answer that middle corridor might have impact on Georgia's economic growth. That's the first one. And the second one is almost always capital markets development could help Georgia, which goes along the lines of the private sector development that you just mentioned. Would you say that these two are the areas where Georgia should look at?
Certainly, middle corridor, and then many institutions, everybody's talking about it. The fact is still this north corridor, the corridor, economic corridor going through Russia is functioning, but with a limited capacity. So in order for the middle corridor to thrive, it is not natural, and then people have to invest. And then from the strategic point of view, it is critical because the country will better to have multiple sources for the connectivity. So maybe this is an opportunity. The North Corridor now is a limited capacity. So the countries along with the middle corridors should invest in the connectivity. And then this is something ADB also promote, the regional cooperation and integration. And then we have a Central Asia Regional Economic, the platform, it's called the CAREC. And then we are promoting this, the international trade and also the logistics across those the middle corridor countries, and then ADB also support the investment in those. So this is the opportunity, and then the Georgia should capture this opportunity. Then capital market development is also it is important, and then the most important, two important things for the capital market development is, one is the governance, another one is the human capital development. And then I'm not aware of the details of the capital control in the country, but then the country should open the capital market, and then we need the trust from the investors. And then unless the governance issues are there, then the investors will not come because there's no trust from the outside. So in order to thrive capital market, you need the trust from the investors, and then in order to do it, you need to improve the governance. And also the people have to have the well knowledge on the finance and also the capital market. And then the human capital development in the education and also the occupational the training is critical. So this finance literacy education is important to develop the capital market.
So what would you say is the main challenge today for the global economic growth and also for Georgia?
I think the main challenge for Georgia is it is in the middle of the middle corridor, and then the industry is not well connected to the supply chain. And then it is the challenge and opportunity. And then the key question is how the Georgian industry and private sector can be a part of the value chain. And then the private sector needs to be better connected and EU market and also the Asia market. So one critical issue is this EU accession of this country. And then also another the critical issue is the private sector to be the grown up and then connected in this the supply chain. Another the challenge and opportunity is the human capital development. And then I think that this country has a very good the human capital development, but still there's a room for improvement. And then this is the great asset to well-educated, well-trained the laborers, and then this will sustain economic growth for the future. So I think that it is important to invest in the human capital development, and also the country has to bring the gender equality, and then the labor participation for both male and female should be improved.
Yes, and my last question, and thank you so much for your time. Would you say that like external factors are driving Georgia's economic growth, and they are more important while talking about the challenges, or the internal factors? And when ADB is evaluating or assessing the outlook, would you look at such challenges that are inside the country? For example, tensions around the Russian law that is very present nowadays, and this instability, political instability that might be hampering with economic development. When
you think about the economic growth, you have to think of the shocks you can control, and then the shocks you cannot. And then many domestic issues, which the details I do not know, but then many domestic issues are manageable. And then any manageable the issues, the government should take care and then intervene and then make sure those will not hamper the economic growth. But as you say, the exogenous shocks, any regional conflicts or the natural disaster, this is not something we cannot prevent. And then this is beyond the control of the government or anyone. Our suggestion is improve the resilience. And then you should prepare for any shocks. And then the country like Georgia, it is a small open economy. And then such countries tend to be affected much more than the larger countries like compared to China. So in order to improve the resilience, this is like a traditional areas you have to work on. So you have to have a hard infrastructure of the transportation, and then the better maintenance, and then the good the power supply, good water supply. Those will enhance the resilience. And then also the soft side, there's good institutions, good laws and governance, and also good human capital development. If you have a good infrastructure, and then if you have a good institution, if you have a good human capital development, then if exogenous shocks come, then the country will be ready for against those external shocks. So these are the ones ADB advocates, and then the government and also the private sector should intervene, prepare for the future possible exogenous shocks.
Thank you for very important insights, Mr. Taniguchi. So shall we see you in Georgia in May for the 75th annual
Unfortunately, I was not invited for the annual meeting because my superior chief economist will come and then he will do the remarks. But that's why I come here to ADO Lounge.
And thank you for taking time and taking our
Thank
questions
you.
again.
The Checkpoints is presented by pharmaceutical company GM Pharma.